What are the deliverables, positioning deliverables? A lot of companies will say, well, what do I get? I'm paying you all this money. You're doing all these things. You're doing competitive research. You're spending a lot of time with key stakeholders. But what are you going to give me? Is it a big document full of all the things I should think about? Is it simply a way of thinking? Is it stuff that I could use for my marketing and sales? What is the end deliverable that says to the CFO or the CMO, okay, you paid us all this money and here's this thing. What is this thing?
It really is the $1 million question. It's a mix. We go through this very in-depth process together. So in my mind, I don't think this is what necessarily customers would latch onto necessarily as the real value. But in my mind, a big part of the value is the process. It's going through it and taking the time, taking a few weeks to think about this stuff on a deep level, obviously also taking the time to do some research and talk to your customers and all of those things. But it's the process. It's the giving yourself some space, some dedicated space to think about this stuff and not just, again, go through and check the box of what we've always done. So that's part of it. But at the end, yes, there is a distilled down document or a book, a guidebook that comes out of this that crystallizes all of these really important findings and ideas that we've had together. We also do a lot of work around messaging. To me, one of the most important outputs of this is that core messaging, and I wouldn't call it a full narrative in terms of how we work, but the story essentially of the brand. Because again, that's going to be coming through in really everything you do, every piece of marketing you do, the first sales call that salespeople have with clients, that pitch that they're talking about, that they're telling them, has to embody those ideas. It's prioritizing the points within the positioning, it's messaging examples, it's the story that's going to be told by salespeople. I know we're really focused on positioning in this conversation. When we do work with brands, we're also thinking about what does that position translate into from a visual perspective, and how do we communicate this in other ways beyond just the messaging. But those are kind of the core outputs for us. Do you guys have any other specific deliverables?
I would say that the fact that you identified the process as one of the key deliverables, I was very happy to hear that, because I think that that is actually the key deliverable. As you say, you don't get a chance to do serious navel gazing very often because companies are so busy doing tactical execution and looking beyond the horizon and looking at their data that they don't have time to think and reflect on the brand and the value delivered. And I've run into situations, one recently, in which I'm in the midst of with the chief revenue officer and the CEO, and we're developing the story and highlighted the positioning, but it's not finished, it's not polished yet. But the CRO is super excited and he starts going to conferences and starts telling the story even before the engagement is done. And he's saying, this is resonating, it's working. He's A/B testing it on the
Yeah.
fly. And I think that reflects the fact that as you go through the process, things surface and they resonate and executives get very excited. The other side of it is the idea of taking value propositions or brand positioning statements that you've developed or even brand promises that you've put together and having that appear in the public, in the wild, on your website, on your about page, on your social media profiles, on your one pagers or your sales decks. Is that what you're talking about when it comes to taking positioning and moving it into the messaging
Yeah,
world?
we do often put it in the context of, we will literally say to clients, think about this as the headline on your website, because I think for modern businesses, the website is still typically the number one touch point for people. It may not be the first touch point. You might run into campaigns and social content and all that good stuff. But the first place they're going to come to learn more is still going to be the website. So I think it's definitely about that. But I really loved what you were talking about with those conversations that people are having, that the C-suite people or whoever the leaders are of the company are having with other people to test out the position, to test out the message and the idea of it and seeing how it resonates with people. I do think that's often where the first the first real tests happen is with those real life conversations. And those are super important. I'm sure you've done it a million times, getting on a first call with a client and you're pitching them about at least giving some general idea of what you do and why you're different, and are just, huh? Or are they smiling? Are they leaning in? Are they listening? Are they responding to that in some way? And that qualitative feedback is super valuable. I think it's a great signal for things are working.